Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr Speaker, like my colleague Phil Twyford, I'm pleased that Labour is able to support this bill in its third and final reading. I have some anxiety after hearing the member who's just resumed her seat. She is from Canterbury, and despite hearing the concerns expressed by Phil Twyford in his contribution earlier on this bill about the fact that the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority legislation gave Minister Jerry Brownlee, in a suite of wartime powers, the power to instruct the Christchurch City Council to sell assets, and the frame that has been developed by the government around the potential of sale of assets, constantly blaming Canterbury for the shortfall in funding, for the crisis with the reinsurers, for the fact that other parts of our country might have to give something up because of the Christchurch earthquakes. Despite that framing and the SERA legislation, the member who just resumed her seat said not a word in defence of Canterbury keeping ownership of our strategic assets. And that is a real concern to me, because it's around this legislation that we have a clear choice. Do we follow the opportunity for some efficiency, for some savings, for some money that can be saved by ratepayers and local authorities and put into our communities, or do we follow the path that clearly John Key and the national government, and I say with the greatest respect to Rodney Hyde, who's always been absolutely consistent in this area, the view that they would prefer, which is a total slash and burn, get out of every single ownership model that they can. So I'm troubled that the member said not a word in defence of our ownership in Canterbury of our strategic assets, but we'll, I suppose, wait and see what happens as time progresses in that regard. Mr Speaker, the reason primarily that we support this bill, although there are a variety of reasons, but the primary reason is that it is a hugely preferable option to the option of privatisation. So if you say, let's look at ways that our local authorities can make more money or can save money, can operate more efficiently, everyone is in support of that. And then you get a range of options. One of them clearly is the privatisation option, where we just have to hock something off. That is a really short-term model. It saves money in the short term, but actually in the longer term, you lose a huge amount. You lose the benefit of strategic ownership, and obviously you lose the income stream from whatever the asset is. And in New Zealand currently, if you look at our power companies, we have a large income as a result of the generation and the distribution of power throughout our country. It's income that is derived from New Zealand citizens. It's collected by the government. It's then distributed back through other channels, whether it's through education or health, superannuation, our social security system. It's distributed back into our country. All New Zealanders own those assets and all New Zealanders benefit, even though, of course, we resent paying high power prices. So why would we want to sell off that strategic asset so that some other owner other than the New Zealand public gets that income? We still have to pay the price, and in fact, as we've seen in other privatised parts of the system, we actually pay a much higher price when the owner is anyone other than central government. So another one of the models that the government could have considered is the public-private partnership. And again, Mr Speaker, this legislation is in preference to that. So this is about mobilising the savings of New Zealand investments. It's about local authorities having an opportunity to save a significant amount of money. It is a very efficient proposal. The local government bond bill was actually floated from an idea originally at the Job Summit 2 years ago. It's very interesting that this is one of the few ideas that has actually been picked up from the Job Summit, given the fanfare around the fact that the Prime Minister was having the Job Summit. Very little has come out of that, and this has come out of it right towards the end of this parliamentary term. So this has taken so long to come from a really good idea supported broadly across the parties in this House, and yet it's taken all this length of time to come to fruition. The concept of the local government bond back actually was proposed also by the Capital Markets Development Task Force. That task force was set up when Labor led the government in 2008. It reported to the National-led government at the end of 2009. At the time, the government said, yes, we support that recommendation, but all it's done previously is to set aside $5 million, a tiny amount of money in the overall scheme of things, in the budget last year. Mr. Speaker, the funding agency is a win-win both for local authorities but also for New Zealanders in the public, and particularly for New Zealanders who are looking for safe and new opportunities for investment and for saving. We will know as investors that that investment is good for our communities. That's always a reassuring thing. People are quite particular about the ethical regime under which their investments occur now. People look more at the downstream effect of their investments, and for New Zealanders to know that they are not only investing for the good of their community, they have some personal benefit from that as well, but they're ensuring that through this efficiency they're taking off one more option of privatisation from the National Party agenda, and I think that will be a very good thing, particularly given the fact that a number of the assets that are in the ownership of local authorities are often monopolies. The only thing worse than a state monopoly that runs inefficiently is a private monopoly that runs inefficiently. We don't need either of those models, and local authorities have done New Zealand proud in the way that they have demonstrated their ability to own and have management regimes that ensure that local government and central government strategic assets are able to be managed very efficiently. Mr. Speaker, the other point that I want to mention, which goes back to the situation that we have in Canterbury, is that it's still to our frustration and anger and deep regret that the government hasn't seen fit to restore our right to democracy in terms of our election of a regional council. Every other citizen in New Zealand has the right to vote for their regional council. In Canterbury, that right was taken away from us with no justification, no reason, rammed through Parliament in a totally inappropriate way, and caused some of the biggest anguish that I have ever heard in Canterbury from National Party supporters and even members against their own government, and that residual anger remains. People resent having the democratic right taken away from them, and I was really hopeful that the government might see fit to restore that democracy before the upcoming election. We only have a small number of sitting days left before the House rises for the adjournment for the election, and then we start again after November the 26th, and I would urge the Minister, Rodney Hyde, to put some pressure, if he has any influence at all, and I'm not sure of his status in regard to influencing of other ministerial colleagues these days, but if he has any ability to influence his other ministerial colleagues, I would ask him to use it and restore our democracy in Canterbury. Mr. Speaker, it's quite an unusual situation where Labor and National and ACT, and I know the other parties around this House, all support legislation, but I think it's a very good indication of the way this has not only gone through consideration by the external groups, as I mentioned, the task force in particular, but it's also a bit of a tribute to the Local Government and Environment Select Committee in that it gave this bill rigorous consideration, made sure that the potential or unexpected consequences of the legislation were considered, and I want to conclude with a tribute to all the members of that Select Committee and also the officials who have worked so hard to ensure that this bill will get such widespread support.
Okay. Mr. Speaker.
Sue Kedgley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Green Party too is pleased to support